Imagine working hard all your life, finally buying a home you can be proud of, and then realizing your biggest problem isn't bills, repairs, or taxes, but a neighbor who simply can't stand you living next to them. This isn't just any neighbor. This is someone who hides behind the authority of the homeowners association, a person who feels entitled to make rules up as they go, and who believes their voice is louder than everyone else's. Now picture this. You walk outside one morning, ready to leave for work, only to notice something unbelievable. Parked right inside your garage. Not in front of your house, not on the street, but inside the private space you own, is your neighbor's car. Yes, you heard that right. A neighbor had the audacity to pull their car into a garage that didn't belong to them. And here's the kicker. It wasn't done by accident. It was done on purpose. The man at the center of his story, a hardworking black homeowner, had been dealing with constant harassment from the HOA, and in particular, one woman who always seemed to have a problem with him. She acted as if the neighborhood belonged to her, as if she had the final say in who should live there and how they should behave. Over time, she became known for her arrogance and her controlling attitude. People in the community whispered about her, calling her the HOA Karen. But this time, she crossed a line so bold, so outrageous, that it left everyone in shock. Instead of respecting boundaries, instead of following the simplest rule of private property, she felt entitled enough to park her car inside his garage while he was away. Maybe she thought he wouldn't notice. Maybe she thought he'd be too scared to say anything. Or maybe, deep down, she thought her position in the HOA gave her untouchable power. But what she didn't know was that this homeowner wasn't going to let it slide. Because when he discovered her car in his garage, he didn't yell, he didn't argue, and he didn't even call the police, at least not immediately. Instead, he made a decision that would flip the power dynamic completely. He used the simplest, smartest, and most legal option available to him. He locked his garage door, trapping her car inside, and waited for her to come back. Suddenly, the same neighbor who thought she could bend the rules was about to learn a lesson in humility, property rights, and consequences. This wasn't just about a car. It was about respect. It was about ownership. And it was about showing that no matter how loud or entitled someone acts, the law doesn't bend in their favor. What happened next turned the entire neighborhood's attention on her and forced everyone to see the truth about how far her arrogance had gone. This is the story of how a so-called HOA Karen parked in a black man's garage, never realizing that he held the key, both literally and figuratively, to putting her entitlement in check. The homeowner had moved into the neighborhood after years of saving, working long hours, and sacrificing luxuries just to achieve one dream, owning his own house. It wasn't just any home. It was a property with space, privacy, and yes, a secure garage that gave him peace of mind. For him, this was more than shelter. It was an accomplishment, a symbol of progress, and proof that he could build something solid for himself and his family. But from the day he moved in, things weren't easy. Almost immediately, the HOA sent letters. At first, they were about small things. Your trash can is visible from the street. Your grass is half an inch too long. Your car isn't parked at the correct angle. Petty complaints, stacked one after another, designed to create pressure. And behind most of those complaints was one name, the woman who chaired the HOA committee. The same woman neighbors quietly called Karen. She had lived in the neighborhood for years, and she wore her position on the HOA board like a crown. She would patrol the streets, clipboards in hand, peeking over fences, pointing out violations, and handing out fines like it was her personal mission. But the black homeowner noticed something quickly. Her energy wasn't the same toward everyone. Some neighbors got away with things. Some weren't fined for obvious violations. Yet, for him, every tiny issue was highlighted. It became clear that he wasn't just being treated like any other neighbor, he was being targeted. At first, he tried to handle it diplomatically. He attended HOA meetings, asked questions, and calmly defended himself. But the hostility never let up. In fact, it grew worse. Rumors were spread. People whispered that he didn't fit in. Some even suggested he should look for another neighborhood more suitable for him. Still, he stayed strong. He knew leaving would mean giving Karen exactly what she wanted. But then came the day that changed everything. One evening, he returned home and noticed his garage door slightly open. He knew he hadn't left it that way. Curious and cautious, He pressed the button to fully open the door, and what he saw stopped him in his tracks. A silver SUV parked neatly inside his garage. His first thought was that maybe a relative had come by. But when he stepped closer, he realized it was Karen's car. At that moment, the reality hit him. She hadn't just nitpicked his grass or written up a violation. She had trespassed. She had driven into his private property and used his garage without his consent. It was a violation so bold that it almost seemed unreal. Now, he could have lost his temper. He could have stormed into her house and demanded answers. But instead, he kept calm. He knew anger wouldn't serve him, strategy would. Quietly, he lowered the garage door again and pressed the lock. The car was now trapped inside. Hours later, Karen showed up. She rang his doorbell with an expression that was equal parts smug and entitled. Without hesitation, she demanded that he open the garage. She said she had an urgent reason for parking there. She even tried to spin it as if she had been doing him a favor, claiming there had been some sort of issue with parking spaces nearby. But he knew better. It wasn't about convenience. It was about power. She believed she could do as she pleased. Calmly, he told her that her car was trespassing on his property, and as the owner, he had every right to keep it locked inside until she explained herself properly or until law enforcement got involved. Suddenly, her tone changed. The smugness melted into frustration. She tried to pull rank, bringing up HOA rules, threatening fines, and even suggesting that she had authority over what happened in the neighborhood. But none of that mattered. Property law was clear. She had no right to be in his garage. Word spread quickly among neighbors. People gathered on their lawns, whispering, watching the scene unfold. Some were secretly thrilled to see Karen finally being challenged. Others looked shocked that someone had dared to stand up to her. Meanwhile, she grew more desperate. She called other HOA board members for backup. She even threatened to call the police herself. And here's where things took a dramatic turn. When the police finally arrived, they didn't side with her. They looked at the situation, looked at the homeowner's title and property records, and made it crystal clear the garage belonged to him. The car was inside without his permission. That meant she was in the wrong, not him. The embarrassment on her face was visible. All her threats, all her authority, all her arrogance crumbled in that moment. The officer calmly told her that the homeowner could, in fact, press charges for trespassing. They even explained that if he wanted, he could have her car towed at her expense. Suddenly, the woman who had spent years bullying neighbors was forced to stand silent, realizing that for once, she had no power. The homeowner, however, chose not to press charges. He wanted the message to be loud and clear, but he didn't want to drag the matter further than necessary. Instead, he made her sign an agreement in front of the officer stating she would never trespass on his property again. From that day forward, everything changed. Karen's reputation in the neighborhood collapsed. The same neighbors who once felt powerless under her scrutiny now realized she wasn't untouchable. She had been publicly humbled, and the black homeowner, once viewed as an outsider, became a symbol of resilience and dignity in the face of discrimination. What made the story even more powerful was the way he handled it, not with rage, not with violence, but with calm strategy and confidence in the law. He turned her arrogance against her, using her own mistake as the perfect lesson in boundaries.